my kako, everyone. Welcome to episode 27 of the Moana Nui podcast. We are so excited. Thank you guys for tuning in and listening and joining us tonight for another amazing show. My name is Moana, and I am the author of the children's book series, The Adventures of Nakoa and Nohea, editor of the Wildcard Chronicles comic book series, self-publisher, indie champion, lover of all things geek, and especially lover of the indigenous people. So thank you guys for joining us tonight. I am joined by my beautiful co-host, Dana.
Hello, everyone. I am Dana with Unique Events. Some of you know me as a cosplay event photographer, staff event photographer. So a lot of times you'll see me at MomoCon, DragonCon, Anime Weekend Atlanta, just to name a few. I also event plan. I just do a little bit of everything. So anyone who knows me knows I do a little bit of everything. So we're so excited for our very next guest that we're going to get ready to introduce. So buckle down and get ready for another great podcast.
Alrighty, so tonight we are joined by the amazingly beautiful and talented Cece the Geek. She is an entrepreneur, philanthropist, and cosplayer from Washington, D.C. Her activist work extends as far back as 2007 as a volunteer in Hurricane Katrina relief efforts. She subsequently founded the Alternative Spring Break program at Bowie State University. Cece takes pride in using her platform to create safe spaces for Black and other marginalized cosplayers. She's also the founder and CEO of HBCU Con, celebrating the influence and intersections of historically Black institutions and the geek community. She's also a co-host, co-writer, and marketing strategist for Everybody Gets One podcast and a consultant for hire. Cece has been cosplaying since 2015 and is a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. You can follow Cece on Instagram and Facebook at Cece the Geek and HBCU Con at HBCU Con. And their website is hbcucon.org. I don't know why, but I always get those letters mixed up. Forgive my my dyslexia. But with that said, let's bring Cece on. We're so happy to have her with us tonight.
Yay! I'm so happy to be here.
Welcome. I love your earrings, first of all.
Oh, thank you. And thank you again. I have the matching bracelet too. I left it at my dad's house, but I love that bracelet so much.
Yes. Alrighty, so let's get started by having you tell us just a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, and how you found yourself in cosplay.
Sure. So, of course, originally from Washington, D.C., and that was a very interesting time, right? Because I went from living in D.C. to living in Prince George's County to then living in Montgomery County. And at the time when I was living in DC was very different than it is today. So I had a very interesting backstory where I kind of saw my parents go from being barely scraping by to doing fairly well for themselves. And thus I have the privilege of having a very well-rounded, I guess, perspective when it comes to the various things that different people of different classes face. Now, of course, I am a proud HBCU graduate, and those 4 years at Bowie State truly shaped a huge chunk of who I am, and really made a lot of things in my childhood make a lot of sense, and charted the course for the path that I'm on now. And it ultimately led me to meeting you two wonderful women. So I, of course, graduated from Bowie State University in 2009. And during that time, founded the Alternative Spring Break Initiative. That's an interesting story in of itself that I guess we could talk about a little bit as well. I don't know. Yeah, I guess that's my elevator speech. And then cosplaying in 2015. I have done some work in addition to that. After I graduated, I actually worked at NIH under Dr. Fauci's leadership for about 7 years, contracting there. And then after that, I did some work for various nonprofit organizations, including in women's rights and racial justice as well. So just very excited and just happy to be here. Sorry, y'all. I can't stress that enough.
We're excited you're here too.
Yeah.
Well, of course, you just talked about of you attending, an historical Black college at Bowie State University. Can you tell us how your experience there not only shaped you as a person, but also your inner geek?
Yes. Oh my gosh. And it's so funny because I feel like I can't even separate those two. I can try, but we'll see how it works out. When I first got to Bowie, my freshman year, my father was actually campus police, so that was interesting. But he did his best to leave me alone. God bless him.
Okay.
But like, I found my tribe at Bowie almost immediately. Outside of my sorors, of course, in Delta, I met my tribe. Like, I have friends from college who we have been friends since freshman year. Like, first semester, I arrived freshman year, and I was part of the university's honors program. So I stayed in a co-ed dorm, and in that dorm there was some variety of different people. And when I first moved in, there was these two guy friends of mine who now like some of my best friends, David Hooker and Marcus Brooks, and they were volunteering with the Student Government Association to help me move in, right? So that was kind of how we hit it off as friends. And then I ran into another friend of mine who we actually had SAT prep together, named Louisa Aguirre, now Louisa Spencer. But to sum it all up, I guess, is we connected almost immediately. Marcus and David's dorm room just so happened to be the room one floor beneath mine. And our rooms were divided into suites, and there were 5 bedrooms in each suite with 2 students in each room, and they all shared a bathroom. So David and Hooker's, we call them Hooker, not David. We call Hooker and Marcus were like the epicenter of that suite, right? And there was a whole setup, like what you see in Moana's background right now. That's how the dorm looked. Like there was like multiple TVs. Some people are watching, Heroes. Remember the show Heroes? Save the Cheerleader, Save the World. That was our jam back in the day. We were watching anime, subs and dubs, and then the other TV, people were playing video games. Like it's Guitar Hero, it's Dance Dance Revolution, it's all of that going on. So and we would just hang out there. Like it literally was my second dorm room. And that was ultimately, like, we called it the Sweet 200. We have a Facebook group, the Sweet 200. Like it's like a cult, basically. Nerds. And it's so funny now because going to Bowie, it's everywhere. Like the nerd culture, what was once something that was like so secluded, and we had to like have a secret society for it, is now kind of everywhere. But the beauty of being in that space was I got to be my full self at all times. I didn't have to compartmentalize my Blackness. I didn't have to compartmentalize my geekness or any other quirk about me that makes me who I am. They just accepted me for all of my flaws and all of my weirdness and all of my boldness. And that was something that I've really come to appreciate. And I'm proud to say that most of those people, in fact, the 3 people I just named, are actually a part of my executive board. And it's really just a labor of love. And HBCU Con, in that essence, has really been years in the making for me, if not a lifetime in the making. Mm-hmm. And then, I did a lot at Bowie. I still haven't tapped into alternative spring break or pledging or nothing. So of course there's the aspect of alternative spring break. and that's its own, journey that I had. And then my journey into Delta. So it's just been a wild ride. And I'm just so thankful for that experience, because it really opened my eyes, not just the HBCU experience, but alternative spring break was a very profound experience in itself, and continues to be, because they revived the program in 2019. But also my experience and the lessons I've learned in Delta has been very profound, and continues to be profound as an alumni soror. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, we're definitely going to ask you a little bit about that. But before we get there, for viewers out there who might be watching, like me, who are not as familiar with the Greek life and what it's all about, can you tell us, like, what are the different organizations and, like, some of the things that they're known for?
Absolutely. So the National Pan-Hellenic Council, also known as the Divine Nine, is made up of 9 major Black Greek letter organizations, also known as BGLOs. And the first of which, or the oldest of which I should say, was founded in 1906. That's Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. So I guess if I go down the line, it's Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, Phi Beta, of course they're all incorporated, I just had to hype it up, Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, Zeta Phi Beta Sorority, Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority, and Iota Phi Theta Fraternity. So just a really well-rounded, and all of us, have various principles, various initiatives that we kind of focus on. One particular thing that I enjoy about Delta is that it has a 5-point programmatic thrust. So it's very well-rounded in terms of its servitude, like economic development, educational development, political awareness and involvement, environmental awareness and involvement, and physical and mental health. So that was something that was very appealing to me, the fact that it was just so well-rounded. And then you have organizations like Sigma Gamma Rho, where they were founded by teachers. So they focus heavily on education. And I actually would recommend to our audience, if you want to learn more, there's a really good book called The Divine Nine, and it was written by Lawrence Ross, who is my friend on Facebook. And he's a really good professor based in California. He's an alpha, and he does public speaking events talking about racism on campus. So he has a really good book, and it's a chapter for each organization. And it's a really good place to start. Like if you don't, if you're just like a deer in the headlights, like I was when I first went to school.
Nice.
That's awesome. I'm going to check that out. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Now, okay, some talk about, of course, you hear about sororities and fraternities, about the colorism, the stereotypes, the hazing, and more than that separates women in the different sororities along with their peers. Yes. What made you decide to become a Delta Sigma Theta, and what makes it stand out for you?
Yeah. And I think that I'm so glad that you brought that up, because there are, like, those things did happen. It's not like, and it's not exclusive to, no organization is a vacuum, right? Every ism that we encounter in our society, you can pretty much bank on finding it in any, realm of life. And especially when it comes to these organizations that are so vast and have histories that extend well over, 100 years. So it is unfortunate that, colorism was a thing. And part of it is that there was a lot of colorism amongst like HBCU admissions as well. Even when Howard University was founded, they would only let what they refer to as mulattoes attend, because they thought that since they had white DNA, that they were more likely to succeed. And they put the campus, they built the campus so that the students would have to walk uphill to go to class, because they thought that they would be too lazy to walk to class. So like it runs very deep in terms of all the colorism, homophobia, and all of the really aftermath of white supremacy that has infiltrated the Black community and other marginalized communities as well. So I'm like making sure I hit all the points and stuff. So, and as far as there's definitely like stereotypes, and I think part of that is just the symbols and principles. Like Deltas, we're known for being like wild and extra. And the AKAs are like known for being like very, you know, refined and poised and stuff. And so there's definitely those stereotypes. And of course, we're known for like step shows. Everybody knows the step shows, and the community service and the aspects of that often gets left out of the arena. But some of the fact of the matter is that some of the greatest, most iconic people and figures of all time have matriculated through these organizations, and many of them did it by their own choice. You know, like Dorothy Height pledged, you know, Martin Luther King went, you know, became an alpha on his own accord. All these, you know, various icons who, and not only that, but the organizations themselves led initiatives and led bus, you know, sit-ins, led bus boycotts, you know, and particularly with Delta Sigma Theta, the 1913 suffrage march in Washington, D.C. I believe Woodrow Wilson was president at the time, but that was the first public act that my founders did as a sorority, was to participate in that march. And they had to get special permission from the university, because at that time you could not leave campus without a male escort. So there was that, you know, so like it's the intersectionality of it is crazy when you read about it. So so they had to get, you know, special permission to leave campus, and they had to have a male escort. And then once they got to the march, the women who led the movement, who of course were pretty much all exclusively white, told them that they had to march in the back of the procession. And, you know, the Black women who marched in that day were spat on. They were called racial slurs, you know, they were pretty much humiliated. But it's crazy because they didn't turn them away because they wanted the numbers, you know, they wanted the optics of it to look good. Like, oh, look at how big our movement is. So it's that long history of white feminism that my founders faced, you know, coming up in college, that is just so you know, indicative of of the things that we see today. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I said when I read it.
How much of history is so hidden. Yeah. So much of POC and Black women history is so hidden from most people's view that you don't realize that how the additional suffrage that so many of them went through that we don't even hear about unless you did the extra study or somebody told you about it.
Exactly. Yep. That's a fact. That is a fact. Yeah. And interestingly enough, I think it's also very telling that, like, if you read up on our founders, for example, you know, some of them we know a lot about, and then some of them we don't know much about because they all came from different backgrounds. Some of them had, you know, some of them came from, you know, wealthy families. Some of them came from families that weren't, you know, and there were some of them who died young. So it's very interesting how that plays out. But one thing that I am thankful for Black Greek letter organizations as a whole is that they have really facilitated kind of like documenting our history. And of course, there are other individuals who've taken that on their own accord, W.E.B. Du Bois being one of them, who, if I'm not mistaken, is also a member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. So there you go. It's like, it's all connected. It's all connected. And Carter G. Woodson is a member of Omega Psi Phi. Like Carter G. Woodson, the founder of Black History Month, is my frat brother. You know, and that's something that makes me very proud to say. Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah, I definitely love the pride in the you know, the different organizations and the historical and educational aspects to it. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
So we mentioned a little bit earlier that you founded a program at Bowie State called Alternative. Again, here I am with this word. Spring break.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. What was the program's mission and what were you able to accomplish?
No worries. And the kids call it ASB now. Everything's an acronym with them. So but that was such an interesting journey because our campus had an organization on the yard called Baptist Campus Ministries. And I didn't know that it was there up until I saw a flyer that was advertising the alternative spring break mission. And Hurricane Katrina had happened in 2005, but this was advertising for a trip in 2007. And I was like, oh, I didn't even think they still needed relief. But, 2 years later, which is crazy. But okay, I've never been to New Orleans. I love, serving the community. And I coerced my friend Louisa into going with me because I'm like, please don't let me do this by myself. And we went, and it was like a straight mission trip. Like when we arrived in New Orleans, and it was about 10 Bowie students. So it was a joint group. It was 10 Bowie students, about 40 or so students from the University of Maryland. And then there were also some students from Anne Arundel Community College. So when we got to New Orleans, you would have thought that the hurricane hit like a week ago, like wow. Sans the water, it was just like still whole complexes leveled, and the debris was still there. You would walk in, through neighborhoods, and all the houses were marked with numbers, and the numbers all meant different things. One number meant how many bodies were found. One number meant this. Like, it was crazy. And when we went for the first time, we were basically doing like Habitat for Humanity stuff. There were houses that had not been touched since the storm hit. And they divided us into two groups where some of us were building homes and the rest of us were gutting homes. So I was on the team that was gutting homes. And we actually got to meet the woman whose home we gutted. Her name was Miss Bernice. And the stories that we heard, and the thing that got me most about it was the division in the stories that you've heard. And a lot of it was based on race. Like, you would hear some of the most horrible things coming from the Black community about stuff that was happening in New Orleans. I mean, everything from, how long it took for help to arrive, and they're sitting on their roof, for however long they need to until help gets there, to whole, conspiracies about that have been validated, about executions that have happened, all sorts of awful things happening inside the Astrodome. And they separated families inside the Astrodome. They divided them up, men, women, and kids. So like some of the children were sexually assaulted in the Astrodomes. Like, it's crazy. And it was just really an eye-opening experience. And at that point, it was like resources were still like running water was a commodity at that point. We had to shower. We stayed at a church and we slept on the floor in sleeping bags. And we had to shower in a trailer. And we all had a maximum of 7 minutes to shower. So I was just like, okay, we're out here roughing it, I'm sure this is nothing to someone who's served in the military, but for a first worlder, it's rough. So, I won't say first world. I'll say developed world, I guess, whatever you want to call it. But at any rate, it was just interesting coming from DC, where we have among some of the highest GDPs in the country, and we don't really want for anything in terms of like resources as a city, I guess. But when you go to New Orleans, when you go to places like New Orleans, and I've done work in the Mississippi Delta area as well, and it's just like going back. It was like going back in time. It really was. And I mean that in terms of like the culture, and in terms like the race relations specifically, and just the infrastructure. But it wasn't all bad. I instantly fell in love with New Orleans. The funny thing about it is because we were with a mission group, they weren't really trying to they let us go to the French Quarter on one night, and then God bless them, you know, they were like, well, you know, that place is kind of like full of sin, and we don't really want you guys to go back down there. And me and my friends from Bowie, and this one guy named Ryan, who was from Anne Arundel, we were like, screw this. And I found the bus route. I found the public bus route to get us downtown to the French Quarter. And we went down there and had a good time, like, you know, and they couldn't tell us we couldn't do it because we're adults, you know. So they're just like, all right, just please don't die, you know. But it was very interesting. And then I think the most eye-opening thing about it was also seeing the difference in reactions and reflections from the volunteers as well. Like, you could tell that some of them just had never had any, some of them were in denial, you know, like one of my sorors who was on the trip with me, I wasn't a Delta at the time, but she was. And she's actually gonna be on a panel for the National Council of Negro Women, but I digress. So there was a guy on our van who said that, yeah, racism isn't like a thing anymore. Like, legit came out and said, and this is in 2007. Okay. This is 2007. It's like, think about where we are now. And this guy was talking about something. Yeah, racism isn't like a thing anymore. And my mentor, or my sorority sister, Ashley, who grew up in North Carolina, and oddly enough, grew up in North Carolina in the same neighborhood that my grandmother lives in. But she was just like, I'm from North Carolina, and I can tell you that racism is still alive and well. So that was just very interesting, all in that one trip. And this is before ASB was even started, right? So I came back from New Orleans, anxious. I had so many mixed feelings, and I was like, you know, I fell in love with the city and I wanted to continue to do the work. But there were certain things with the groups that we were with that kind of like turned me off to that experience. And I'm like, well, no wonder, you know, we don't, you know, have the numbers that I feel like we should. And when we were in New Orleans that first year, Howard University was there, and they had like 300 people, 300 students there. So I'm looking at them, and that was when it hit me. And I'm like, why can't Bowie do that? Why can't Bowie do that? You know, so I got back. I immediately went to the director of the honor student organization, Dr. Monica Gross, and she's still there, love her to death. And then she referred me to now retired vice president of student affairs. Well, he's not retired. He's at Frostburg now. But he was the vice president of student affairs at that time, Dr. Artie Travis. And once she connected me to him, it was like the rest was history, essentially. He and I pretty much planned the first official trip by ourselves. And then that subsequent year, I had a committee, you know, I had a student committee. So it was really cool to see that. And then actually the year I graduated, I won the Presidential Student Leadership Award for the work that I did, and for starting that organization. And that was an award that was traditionally given to the president of the SGA, because they were the ones who did the most work, you know. So that was just really cool to have had that experience. And of course, you know, it ultimately influenced and solidified my desire to pledge Delta and my desire to make a life of helping people, and particularly marginalized people and Black people. Mm-hmm.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, of course, you mentioned a little bit at the beginning, but tell us about your first experience attending a fan convention and what it was like playing for the first time.
Okay. So I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay. So my first fan convention was in 2015. It was actually Baltimore Comic-Con. That was the same con that I first met the lovely Moana at. I think it was 2016 that you and I met, however. But 2015, I had just started a new job. And so I had a little disposable income, and cosplay was something that I had always wanted to do. And there was a show that came on a few years prior to that called Heroes of Cosplay on Sci-Fi. And I just fell in love with that. Me and my best friend were roommates at the time, Aaron. And Aaron and I fell in love with this show. We fell in love with Yaya Han, who was just, like Yaya Han was just like this wonderful person. And she's like, what can't she do? And it was just really cool. And Aaron and I, we were just sitting there in our rooms, like with this pipe dream, like one day we're going to do this and, we're going to be cool just like them. So I just decided I'm going to do it. Mm-hmm. And I went to Spirit Halloween and I bought a Black Widow Age of Ultron costume. And my friend Emily, who I went to high school with, she was the one who kind of first told me about it. And we were like 16 and she's like, yo, there's these conventions and there's geeks. And she's like, these geeks, they get together and then they geek out. And then at night they party and then they just have wild parties. And sometimes they do other stuff too. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to know about all that. It's a bit much. It's like, I'm 16. This is a little too adult for me, but it sounds really cool. I want to try this one day. So Emily joined me, as well as my dear friends, Bryant and Tracy. And we just walked around the convention halls, and it was so striking to me because people were asking to take my picture. And I'm like, y'all want to take a picture of this? Like, okay. So, but what I noticed was that most of the people who asked to take my picture looked like me and looked like members of my family. So I'm like, maybe there's something to this. Maybe there's some sort of importance or significance to someone looking like me walking around in these costumes. And it's funny because I ran into one other Black Widow throughout that whole weekend. And I took a picture of her. She was with Nick Fury. And I love that picture. But it was just like, going from that to like finding the one other Black woman who was like cosplaying my character to now, if I go to a convention cosplaying as any of my characters, I'm going to see multiple Black women in the same costume 9 times out of 10. And that's just really the beautiful thing about it, is seeing how big and how vast the blurred community has become, over the years. So, yeah. I know it's a long-winded response, but
all right. Love it.
No, that's really, really cool to hear. So, you've come a long way since your first con, and a few years ago, you came up with the idea for HBCU Con. What inspired you to create it, and what are some of the goals that you have for your event?
Yeah, awesome. It's so funny that you mentioned that, because I think by the time I finished Baltimore Comic-Con, like my first con, I was already starting to like conceptualize what it would be like to have a convention that reflected who I am as a person in that sense, like the HBCU, the Geek and the Greek and all those various things. And at first I was like, oh, maybe I'll have a Greeks and Geeks convention where we can sell like Greek paraphernalia and nerd paraphernalia. And we can like talk about how there are actual like nerds who were part of like Martin Luther King was a huge Star Trek fan, who convinced Nichelle Nichols to stay on the show when she was considering leaving for Broadway, because Broadway was more her bag at the time. So, but just now I don't lost my train of thought because I love Nichelle Nichols so much. But it's just been, in terms of founding HBCU Con, it was something that I had immediately thought of or begun to conceptualize when I started cosplaying. And then I think by the end of 2017, that was when I was like, oh, HBCU Con, like, of course, like I couldn't come up with a name for it to save my life, but I knew that I wanted this thing to happen. And what really made it click for me was when I was looking back on my life, and I always kept going back to the Sweet 200, my group at Bowie State, where we would watch, our favorite shows and play our favorite video games. But we could also talk about politics. We could also talk about race issues. We could also talk about our personal issues amongst each other. And I decided that I was going to recreate that space on a grand scale. I made up my mind that every Black person deserves to have the feeling of affirmation and comfort that I got when I went to the Suite 200, and I still get when I talk to them, and when I lean on them for help. So I feel like having had that experience and me being an HBCU grad, and on top of that, has just really affirmed who I am as a person, to the point where I'll talk to people who didn't go to a HBCU, and they're like, man, it's just something about y'all. Like, y'all just got a whole aura about y'all where it's like, you're that person, like, who you are, and no one can tell you differently. And that's just something that I really want to recreate, that unapologetic Blackness, but also living fully into your geekness. Because when I was coming up, even going back to my childhood, my mom named me after Star Trek. Like, my mom named me after Shauna of Triskelion. She was in the original Star Trek series. She had green hair, and she came from a planet where they wore collars around their necks because they weren't allowed to show like a bunch of emotion, because they felt like emotions were the root of all problems, right? So that was like her character. So like, my mom's a huge Star Trek fan, huge sci-fi. She was watching X-Files. She was watching even recently Game of Thrones. True Blood is her show. Lovecraft Country is her show. My dad loves Star Wars, and he was also like constantly watching the History Channel. So it was like a perfect blend of, really nurturing my geekness in the various fandoms, but also nurturing my love of history and academia and Black culture as well. So I say all that to say that I grew up in a world where being Black and being a geek were never mutually exclusive. It was never mutually exclusive. In fact, it was very much, intertwined and one and the same. And that's, and Moana and I have talked about this several times. Like, people came to Africa to study. Like, Africa was the Mecca, literally, of education and enlightenment. And it's just, I think that the more we can really echo that and amplify that we can really change the world. As cliche as it sounds, that's what I believe.
Awesome. Yes, definitely. Now, on a different kind of topic, I always grew up with my aunt saying that every person needs their board. There's a network of people that's on your level or above to push you and to help you grow on your desired path. Do you have that professional and, of course, your con/cosplay board? And how did you figure out which people were the right people to be placed on that board?
Ooh, that was probably the hardest part, right? And not just on the board, but just around me, period.
Yeah.
Because that is so, like, you think that your personal stuff isn't going to transcend to your profession, but it does. Like, that's all we all know. When we go to work, what do our coworkers do? They come to work and project their issues on us. You know what I mean? That's all they do, whether it's good or bad. So like, that was something that I really had to recognize, was boundaries and recognizing that as much as I want to, I can't take everybody with me. And or if I do, there may be a certain capacity in which they, some people everybody's got their role, right? So, and some, we all have friends, some are closer than others, and some of them are just strictly professional. I'm the type of person where I'm very warm and fuzzy. So it always helps when we have a personal relationship. And the people who I do the most business with, because we're always conversing and stuff, I make it a point to like check in on them and be like, hey, how you doing? And they do the same for me. I think it made for a much more receptive relationship where we listen to each other and respect each other's thoughts. And even like Moana and you, Dana, as well. You two are part of that board, like legit. So and I guess if you want me to name names, I could do I have Marcus. I got Marcus and Louisa. My best friend, Erin, like even my best friend helps, she works for Prince George's County Schools. So, she's done a lot to like really look out for me and in that nature as well. But I think that like having people in your corner who genuinely care about you, not just your organization, not just what you're doing, because if they become attached to what you're doing, then there's that fine line of using you. And and when it comes to that, it's like, okay, there's no mutual yoking. They're just kind of like taking whatever they can get from you, and they're not really going to give you anything back unless they feel like they have to. And though that doesn't really work well for me. I don't like forcing things. So, and I've been, I'm 33. I'm not trying to sound like some wise old woman or anything, but I've been around enough to know that it's just that important to have people who really care about you. And even though some people might be useful, it's important to, if they're in that category where they're just trying to use you, it's important to like keep them in a place where they can't like compromise your well-being and your sanity. Because that was something that was very profound, something that I really internalized, was that I will give this all away before I go crazy. I will give this all away before I go crazy. And that was why it was so important. And I really just had to like lean on my friends and be like, hey, I know that you got a lot going on. You got a job, you got a kid, you got this, that, and the third. But our experience at the Sweet 200 is what inspired me to create this movement. So I need you involved. Like I need you involved in this. And all the cosplayers and stuff who I've found in this community, like Wendell Smith, who is our vice president, and he's just like,
shout out Wendell.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's like when he became vice president, I'm like, of course it's you. Someone, you just been sitting here all this time just waiting for me to just wake up. And so ever since then, and of course Wendell's a Marine, so he compliments me so well in terms of like making sure that everybody's tight, that we have an agenda. This is what we're gonna do. And delegating, because I'm terrible. Like I'm better. I promise I'm better now. But like I'm hyper independent. I'm like, I'm gonna do it all myself because this is my baby and no one else is responsible for this but me. But Wendell has done a really great job of helping me like get it together as the CEO. And I also want to shout out just as important as my mentors, Ian Freeman, my publicist, who he's great. So 4 things I would highly recommend any entrepreneur has, right? When you're starting a business, you need a publicist, you need a lawyer, you need an accountant. And there was one other thing, I can't remember what it is. You need a publicist, a lawyer, an accountant. And I think that those are like the big 3. Definitely make sure you have that in check. But also, as equally important as having mentors, you got to have a mentee, and that was something that has been even more of a journey, because it's like, you think disappointing your mentors is bad. The thought of disappointing a mentee is something that haunts me almost every minute of my life, and they're so precious. Tyra Harrison, who is our director of marketing, she's our social media manager, and she just graduated from Bowie State in December of 2019. And then we have Olatunde Floyd, who is our program coordinator. And also just a slew. I feel like I could really talk for a full hour talking about who all my mentors are. Professor Teodros, I really want to highlight Professor Teodros Makeshua, though, from Bowie State University, because he really like was a godsend in terms of helping us get the resources to actually secure space and to secure a partnership with Bowie State's Department of Fine and Performing Arts. And even prior to that, he was chair of the Visual Communication and Digital Media Arts program. So we initially partnered with them, and then he just recently got promoted to chair of the Fine Arts Department. So now we're working in conjunction with the entire department. And it's just a really beautiful thing. And actually, we have a panel coming up on the 24th. Our flyer is going to drop soon, but we're going to have a panel, and it's a part of Bowie State University's official Black History Month celebration, which is facilitated by their history department. But the history department is working in conjunction with all the departments and stuff. So we're going to be presenting A Different World HBCU Geeks on February 24th. That's a Thursday, and I believe it's going to be at 6 o'clock. Don't quote me on the time though, but it's definitely going to be on the 24th. So it's just been a wild ride in terms of like all the relationships I have made. And I think that that's something that's so important. Like, I don't have a lot of money, you know what I mean? I'm not, you know, there. So a lot of people are like, well, what do you got to do to start a con? What do you need to start a con? And the answer is usually money, because let's face it, you need money to do anything. But if you don't have a lot of money, right. But it's like, but if you don't have a lot of money, and even if you do, you know, it shouldn't dictate how you treat people. But the relationships that you build are paramount. It is paramount to your success. And like the things that I've done and the relationships that I've built and the random acts of kindness that I have shown people come back, like, even if it's like 10 years later, like, it always circles back to you, and you just never know who's in your corner waiting to support you. And it's like, all you got to do is build it. All you got to do is build it, and they will come, you know?
Definitely.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So because of your equality views, along with being a Black woman cosplaying, you've dealt with your share of keyboard warriors and toxic people in cosplay and the con world.
Yes, ma'am.
As well as social media too.
Yes.
How have you been able to deal with the toxicity and make your own mark in the space?
Wow. And I think even more importantly, than equality, equity is something that I've learned to like really differentiate. Like, I was very equality up until I started doing nonprofit work. I'm like, nah, equity is where it's at, you know? So, but in terms of like, of course, as we talked before, no community is a vacuum. No matter where you go, you know, so I don't want people to be deterred from the cosplay community because of whatever rumors you may have heard, or what have you about the community, because no matter where you go, it's going to be some stuff. It's going to be some stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it was definitely a challenge for me at first, because I'm somebody who takes a lot of pride in, you know, how I treat people. And I take a lot of pride in my integrity, and being kind of like painted in a way that doesn't fall in line with who you feel like you are is kind of like traumatizing a little bit, especially when it's done in a large forum. And you kind of like see people who you thought cared about you or thought you could trust kind of like alienate you. And that hurts, you know, it does. Like, it hurts. I got feelings. Shit, it hurts. But I've had to like learn, like, when all those things begun to happen, I immediately took a step back. And I begun to lean a little heavily on my friends outside of the community. And I think that kind of, and not even just my friends outside of the geek community, but particularly outside of the cosplay community, because there's levels to it, right? Like Moana is a member of the Geek community. You guys are members of the Geek community, but Dana and I are members of the cosplay community because we actually cosplay. And there's the difference in the ways in which I've interacted with people who are cosplayers versus people who are writers, and of course there's overlap among those groups as well. And not to say that one group's better than the other, because I've encountered trash on all sides, but but I think that like me taking a step back and kind of like having conversations with people outside of the cosplay community really put things into perspective, one. And then two, I started going to therapy. But I started going to therapy in 2017. And that in of itself was a very, that was life-saving. Like I'll say it to this day, therapy saved my life. Like it really did. And having a Black woman therapist, even on top of that, was just like, oh my God, where have you been my whole life? So to those who have the resources, I don't care what issues you have or think you don't have. Like, even if it's just a check-in every couple of months, get a therapist. Like, please get a therapist. It's been a wonderful experience. Now, it wasn't all pretty and fun. You know, I had to face a lot of my own stuff, you know, and like the ways in which I allowed things to happen, or ways in which I contributed to, you know, making a bad situation worse. Or because I'm not perfect. I'm not going to sit here and try to pretend like, oh, I didn't, you know, I've never made mistakes in my life. I've done things that I'm not proud of. And said things that I'm not proud of. But at the same time, you know, I also recognize that even with all of my flaws, the person who I was back then didn't deserve that. And I say I want to echo that because I know that there are other people in the community who feel the same way. So just try to, like, my whole thing was, once I took a step back and I reflected, I'm like, do I really still want to be a part of this community? Because that's what my therapist, that was one of the first things she said. She's like, do you even want to be a part? She's like, it sounds messy. And I'm like, you know, when I thought about it, I'm like, this is kind of like what this community has kind of been something I've been waiting for my whole life. So if I'm going to stay here, if I'm going to, you know, stay in this community, then I want to make sure that I make a mark in it. And that, you know, really honing in on the ability to create a space in the way that I envisioned it, in the way that I envisioned how cosplayers should be treated, or the way that I envisioned how our Blackness, you know, should be presented or not presented, you know, just really kind of resonated with me. And that was something that was paramount to me. So I'm like, if I'm going to stay in this community, then I want to make sure that I am a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. And that was when I ultimately started HBCU Con. And I'm just thankful to have a good mix. Like, we have a good mix of cosplayers, but we also have geeks who are both engaged and not engaged in the community. So it just really makes for a very well-rounded team. And just constantly. And even now, like, I vent, you know, if I have issues, whether it's professional or personal, I have people who I call like immediately. Like, my publicist is someone who I call. I'm like, all right, what should I do? Or Nuri and Moana are people who I call. Like, I'm Facebook messaging, like, all right, you know, or even if it's just a distraction, you know, like, I'll hit them up and be like, hey, how can I help you? Because y'all are people who I believe in. Y'all are people who I know that, you know, will, you know, appreciate the work that, not only appreciate the work that's done, but do it in a way that, you know, kind of aids to helping the community more than just like, you're just trying to make money off of it. So, and same with you, Dana, you know, as well. Like, when you were, I remember you being there. Like, anytime I'm in Atlanta, you're always there, and you're always like working hard. Black Geeks of Dragon Con, you know, and like really admiring both of you as photographers as well, because there aren't a lot of women photographers in this community, especially women of color. So just it's been crazy, like all the stuff, but looking back on it, I really don't think I would change a thing, because it's like I'm here now, and I'm just I feel so blessed to have come this far that I just can't stop now. I can't. Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Now, another thing that us women have to deal with is oftentimes women have to deal with doubt of their geek side, because it's the preconceived notion that women only say they like these things. It's either for clout or because of a guy.
Right.
How do you try to beat this notion that continues to be echoed not only within the geek space, but especially those that are Black geeks? Because that's where we hear it the most.
Yes, we do. Yeah. And I definitely think that you're right. And particularly it's kind of unfortunate because, like, if you were to compare, like, one of us with a white woman geek, then we're more than likely going to probably have our card pulled. So even by our own people, which is crazy. So, but that's something that like, even when I first came out as a cosplayer, people tried to discredit me because I was a Delta, and that just did not compute for me at all. I'm like, but the benchmark of being a member of this organization is academic success. Like, I didn't understand. Like, what do you mean? Like, how is this not the same? So, and then, because of how I look, like, people just always find a way to size you up, no matter who you are. And I think that that's something that I really just want people, like, no matter what it is, if it's like lack of body positivity and people fat shaming or whatever, or, in my case, like, especially once I lost weight, I got hypersexualized, a lot. And I actually got kind of sexually assaulted at my first convention experience by a vendor, who, like, put his hand a little too low on my back when he asked to take a picture. And then he was like, oh, the picture didn't take, can we do it again? And then he did it again. So it was like, and I was like petrified in that moment, and I wound up reporting him after the fact. So, but it was just, the misogyny in the community is something that, quite frankly, I have never encountered this level. And I think part of it is also because it's really adjacent to the entertainment industry. But I've just never, and I guess I've been spoiled too, because I also worked in the feminist movement. So there's that. But just never really encountered that level of like constantly doubting me because of my gender. I've been doubted because of my race all my life, but never so much because of my gender. And that was just something that was very odd to me, because when I was coming up in school, all the way through college, I was literally labeled a nerd. Like, they're like, no, you're a nerd. There's nothing you can do about it. Sorry. And then once I joined the nerd community, they're like, no, you're not. I'm like, but I thought, but the evidence is here. I thought, So that's something that, again, why I think it's so paramount for women like us to create these spaces, because it's like, I'm the CEO of HBCU Con at the end of the day, and I can assure that won't happen at my events. You know what I mean? Or at least if it does, I can actively do something to stop it. It's just, that's something that I really hope continues to change over the years, because we really do, like, women we are the top consumers in pretty much every industry. And I'm sure the geek industry is not, like, even if we're not the leaders in consumption, we're probably pretty substantial. So you can't, like, just dismiss half the human population and say that we're inauthentic. And then the clout thing is just weird to me. Like, being a nerd has only become cool. Like, it's still not even really cool. Like, they like the costumes, but they don't really, unless you're, like, into the culture, they don't care about it other than that. They think we look cool, but they don't recognize like Yu Yu Hakusho, and they don't recognize Sailor Mars. I've been called Wonder Woman every time I wear a Sailor Mars costume outside of a convention. And I'm like, they don't look okay, whatever. So, but so I just think that it's so important for us to recognize that, and particularly in the Black and communities and Indigenous communities, because we're all we got. And, and it's kind of just unfortunate to see that. And again, and then there's that element of like usefulness as well. Like, oh, okay, it looks good to have a Black woman echoing our narrative, or it looks good to post a Black woman here to say these things, but then you don't really follow through on it. And it makes that person look ridiculous. And then it also makes you look ridiculous, because it's like, wait, y'all said that you were about X, but you're not really like showing that. And that happens, in a variety of different ways. So, yeah, man, we gotta really lift up women's voices, and I don't think that that's gonna much grow or change until we start taking control of our own spaces. And I just and there are women in the community who are doing that. Regine Sawyer, Women in Comics Collective, Women in Comics Con up in New York, and Erica Hardison, who's the founder of Fabulized Magazine, and she has meetups in New York called My Superheroes Are Black. And, and Dana, the stuff that you do in Atlanta, working with Jabbar and Cosplay Your Way. My dear friend Tall and Kel, who does, she was doing the like fashion shows and like body positivity stuff, and added cosplay elements. And then she did the Space Between video project as well. Yeah. So there are definitely Black women, Indigenous women, kicking ass and taking names, if you don't mind my saying so. But it's important that we like continue to support them and put our money where our mouth is as well. Yeah. That's so important. Yeah.
You just said an entire word.
Yeah. And someone said in our comments, which Moana posted up, that one of the biggest things is a lot of people tend to say women don't know what we're talking about, and we just cosplay for attention.
Right. Which is crazy to me,
Like, we're not getting paid for this. I just spent hundreds of dollars on this cosplay, and I'm just doing this for attention, and I'm not getting $1 off of me cosplaying. I'm not a model. I'm not getting paid by Marvel to dress up as, Black people.
I got accused of that. When we did Dragon Con in 2019, there was a viral picture of myself, Beautiful Disaster.
Of the three of you, yes.
Beautiful I remember Disaster. That. Yep, Kai Ash Black. And then can't think of it. I'm like, I know this person. Beautiful. And Jay. Hey Jay Cosplay. Yeah. And we got accused of being paid models at the convention. And I'm like, I spent a lot of money to be at Dragon Con. Exactly. The badges are not cheap, and I still had to get my costume together and everything. And it was just wow to me. Because it went viral. People loved the picture.
And because the picture went viral, it just got that negativity. And it's like, the picture went viral. People love the picture, but then it's always those people that come out the corners of nowhere. And it's like, they're just, they were placed there. They're just doing it for attention. And it's like, do you know how hot Dragon Con is in August? It is for attention. And this is outside, not inside. It's outside.
Right. If it was staged, we would have had a nice backdrop. There would have been branded like Dragon Con here. You know what I'm saying? That's a stage shoot.
Yeah, a fan blowing, keeping you cool.
Right. All this going on. But no, I think it's like, if you yourself as a Black man or Indigenous man or whatever can be a nerd and genuinely enjoy it, then it's like, why couldn't your female or non-binary counterparts do the same thing? That's just, and I think part of that is just the overall dehumanization of women as well. and queer and non-binary folks, that, you know, we couldn't possibly just be human and have hobbies and have interests. So really just unpacking that on a human level, because that's ultimately, you know, where we're at. And I'm thankful for my experiences as an activist, because I was able to quickly identify those dynamics within the community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All righty. So let's wrap it up with one last question. What does being a hero mean to you? And what is it like having your very own heroine character in a comic book series?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So HBCU Con has 4 core values, right? Art, culture, scholarship, and integrity. And out of all those, integrity is probably the one that I hold up the highest, because without integrity, all of those other 3 things fall through the cracks. And that was just, to be a hero, integrity is the core value of being a hero. Like doing the right thing, not what's convenient, you know, not what's going to get you a personal gain in that moment or in the long run, but what is really like the moral and just thing to do in this situation. And again, like equity over equality, you know, where like equality is saying, okay, you know, we all like there's 9 slices of pizza. So equality says that the 3 of us will get 3 slices each, right? But equity says Dana hasn't eaten in 3 days. Dana needs more than 3 slices of pizza. You know what I mean? So that's something that just, you know, for me as to be a hero and really to be a leader, because I think that those 2 are so synonymous. There's a quote that my line sister said once, my line sister Shandar, and she said, "A leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way." And you have to have all of those 3 things. You have to know what you're doing. You have to know what your path is and who you are and what you know, where you stand on things. And not only that, but you have to be willing to stand on it. And that means that you might be unpopular. That means that people might not like you. You know, that means that you might be the bad guy in somebody's story. You might be the bad guy in several people's stories. You know what I mean? And then more importantly, showing the way. You know, and you can't have in either of those without the other. You can't get to showing the way before you know and lead by example yourself, because that's something that we so often make that mistake of, is we talk a good game. You know, we talk a good game and we post to the high heavens about Black Lives Matter, trust Black women, protect Black women, and all of those good things. But if that doesn't transcend to how you do business, and if it doesn't transcend to your relationships, if it doesn't transcend to how you treat your wife or your sister or your mother or your father or your best friends or your employees, you know, especially and particularly employees for me, because, you know, having studied sociology, like I understand that like your employees' lives are basically in your hands. Like in a world that in a capitalist society, their lives are in your hands, you know, not just in terms of like money to be made, but also their name and their brand and their reputation, you know. And so being a hero for me is just truly like embodying that. And Moana and Nuri, I talked about this, the concept of the hero within ourselves, and understanding that all of us has that, you know, we all have a hero inside of us. You don't have to look a certain way. You don't have to speak eloquently. You don't have to go to a prestigious university to be a hero. You just have to do what's right and really, you know, hone in on your gifts and use it to make the world a better place. Use it to make your communities a better place. And that leads perfectly into Wildcard Chronicles and how they're just doing the damn thing with creating characters who are, you know, in the image of real influencers in our communities, like pioneers in our communities, like Yayi Ramos, who is the first, the Queen Rough Rider, the queen of all Rough Riders, like the original bike club. And I was like, what? Like the Rough Riders? Like the Rough Riders. Okay. So, but for me, like when Nuri said, he dropped, I believe it was Jean was the character that was dropped. And I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. I'm watching the video and he was like, you're next. And I was like, yeah, but I've heard it all before. I'm like, okay, I totally forgot about it, but then he comes up like a few months later with this video that, and I'm just like, what is happening here? This is the coolest thing ever. And to this day, I'm just like, it's surreal. It's surreal. It's surreal. That's all I gotta say. I know you got the video queued up, Moana. So the video is pretty much going to show you how geeked out I was. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, we'll just show a quick clip. It's not the full video of your reaction, but I just want people to see.
Yes, ma'am.
You're already heroes. Just sit back and enjoy the ride.
Uh-oh. Sorry, y'all.
Nah, it's the HD.
Come on, internet.
I don't know.
You're already heroes. Just sit back and enjoy the ride.
Oh yeah. Theta Magnus. That's my girl. Yes. And I just can't thank Nuri and Moana enough because they say that you have two deaths, right? There's your physical death, like where your spirit transitions or whatever you may believe or not believe. And then there's the death of your legacy. And Nuri and Moana have done me a huge favor in just giving me a legacy. Even before HBCU Con was launched or solidified as an organization, this is something that, even my family, they're very proud of it to this day. And, like my dad came by the table at Awesome Con. That was his first ever convention. And he legit had more fun than I did that day because they had a Star Wars exhibit there. He went nuts. But, we were stopping by the table and he was like buying the artwork and everything. But like the first thing he was saying was like, he's like, no, I want the comic with my baby on the cover. I want the poster with my baby on it because that's, I could only imagine what it's like to be a parent and then your kid is and is a superhero. So it's I just want to echo that and just applaud you for your work in really making heroes and amplifying heroes who really do exist in this world because we have them and they're doing a podcast right now.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks for those kind words, Cece. I mean, it was just our way to honor, and give recognition to the real life people who are in our circles. It's very much the reason why I started the podcast, right? Like, COVID had a lot to do with it too, but I mean, you called it out too. Like, it's all about the relationships that you have. And, I think the podcast is a way for people to understand, the real life people behind these amazing projects and the skills that they bring to the table and all of the hard work that folks are putting in. Because, I mean, especially in the independent community, like, we are not making money like people think we are. It is really our passion and love and pride in our community that keeps us going. I mean, it's definitely what wakes me up. And wakes me up in the morning, keeps me up at night. I mean, Dana and I are always going, like late into the night.
It's always one of us will say we're going to bed, and then we're still chatting after midnight. And it's like, okay, we are going to bed.
That is awesome. Right. Right now, it's 5 a.m. No, that's awesome. And even it's funny because like I woke up this morning and I was kind of like, I've had a few days because it's a pandemic and last year was traumatizing for all of us on various levels, and we're still processing it. So I have mornings where I don't want to get out of bed. And then I'll start getting messages from my team, or I'll see the 28 Days of Black cosplay post for today. And I'm like, oh, it's time to get up. I got a team, I got a team to lead, so to your point, Moana, this stuff really does get me up in the morning. And it's what I dream about at night. So it's just wonderful to be in this space with you two. And this podcast is wonderful as well.
Thank you, sis.
Thank you.
Alrighty. So we went a little bit long tonight, but it was so worth it. We had a lot to talk about, and Cece graciously gave us a little bit extra of her time. So thank you all so much. Thank you to our listeners out there who are, watching and enjoying the show. We really appreciate your time as well. And we hope that you feel welcome within our community. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. I'll just give one shout out again to our season 2 of the podcast. Our sponsor, Chat and Draw, by Mike Watson. He has an active Kickstarter campaign right now. A couple more days left. I think he's very close to one of his stretch goals, which I believe is $5,000. Yeah. So he has it's a similar show. He brings folks on, creators, cosplayers, different types of people. He's open, to expanding his audience in a lot of different ways. But he's an amazing artist, and he chats with you just like we do right now. But he also draws during it, and at the end you can see like what he has created for you. So he has a couple guest spots in that campaign, and then he also has some amazing sketchbooks of all the art that he has created. Nice. I think he's up to like 120 episodes now, which means 120 pieces, which to me is amazing. Right. So definitely go and check that out. We will also be in an anthology that's dropping on February 15th on Kickstarter. It's 4 pages, 16 bars by Brother Jibba. And so be on the lookout for that. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, share it, like it, help us expand our community, because I know there are a lot more people just like us who would love to have a space where they could come and learn more about the movers and shakers of our community. So once again, thank you guys so much for joining us. Dana and Cece, any last words?
Just also on top of, as you see scroll on the bottom, please follow Cece on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, along with HBC Con. Also, for the podcast, we are on Facebook. We're on YouTube, as Moana said, and we're also just recently got on Twitch. So if you're more of a Twitch person versus YouTube, follow us there. You can watch us live when we have these podcasts on every Thursday, and be able to follow us there. So we have 3 platforms. So there's no excuses. 3 platforms.
That's dope. I guess if I have anything else to say to folks, since you already did me the great service of shouting out my social medias, is I know that times are hard right now, and no matter what your situation is, just keep going.
Yeah. Absolutely. All righty, everybody. Thank you again for tuning in. Take care. Be kind to one another, and we will see you on the next show. Bye-bye.